Welcome back to another episode of Crann, beatha, short stories and poetry. I'm Terrance Ó Domhnaill, your Irish scéalaí, returning again this week with more stories and poems from authors around the world. This week I have 3 stories and 2 poems. My first story is part 1 of a Bulgarian tale about a young girl and dragons. I'll read part 2 next week. My second story is taken from an old Scottish Gael story about brownies. Then the third is from Africa, a story about a parrot and his love. The poems I picked out are about war and death, and a dark poem about autumn from a Substack writer. So gather around once more. Let me read to you under the shade of the Crann, beatha, the tree of life. As I said, the first story, it's called Dragon's Wings, Part 1, Unbearable Fears by Mariana Bosarova, published in Read or Die. She has a note here. This story was initially written in Bulgarian in 2018. I'll publish it in 2 parts because it's a bit long and for easier reading. This is part 1. The path meandered and twisted like a serpent stretched beneath the sun. Malina climbed the slope slowly, and the feeling of being doomed grew stronger. She didn't even dare to look to the side, keeping her eyes fixed on her feet. She approached the peak step by step, and her fear turned into terror. It was so high. The crags ahead looked like grinning skulls, gnawed away by millennia of winds. The bones of their limbs stretched toward her, ready to grab and crush her in their stony grip. She paused briefly to catch her breath and calm her breathing. She leaned her palms on her knees and breathed through her nose. Inhale, exhale. She didn't want to think about how high she had climbed. She didn't want to look at the gigantic rocks plunging from this dizzying height into the valley below. She felt nauseous and swallowed the bitterness rising in her throat with difficulty. She had no right to give up. She didn't want to carry such guilt for the rest of her life. Malina cautiously looked upward. She was only a short distance from the summit, just 10 steps or so, which seemed endlessly far and unreachable. Her legs felt as heavy as lead, and her heart raced wildly. Forcing herself onward, she gritted her teeth and continued her way ahead. The last rays of the sun pointed to the opposite slope in a blood-red hue, reminding her of the color of blood splattered on the rocks. A painful groan escaped her lips, and she squinted. She was making things harder for herself. The memories came flooding back, overwhelming her uninvited. "Stay there, Malina. Don't come any closer." Her mother's voice was stern, and the look she gave her pinned her in place. Malina could see the slender figure of her mother creeping along the narrow ledge, trying to reach a few precious stalks of herbs. The fingers of her right hand were almost white from the effort to hold on, while her left hand picked the plant, slowly tucked it into the pouch strapped to her back, and started to step back. And then, in a split second, her mother lost her balance. Her shoe slipped on a small stone, and she plummeted into the abyss below. Malina heard her mother's terrified scream, which echoed in her ears for a long time, resonated through her body, and made her tremble uncontrollably. She ran, forgetting any sense of self-preservation, to the edge of the cliff, crouched, and leaned over it. Below, she could see her mother's motionless body, sprawled with unnaturally twisted limbs. Malina called out to her, knowing that the woman was unlikely to respond. She was painfully aware that her mother couldn't possibly have survived such a fall onto the rocks. The girl couldn't remember how she made it down to the village to call for help. After that, now an orphan, she was taken to a childless couple in a distant place, a small village nestled in the embrace of the mountains. No one asked for her consent. They simply got rid of the responsibility for a young child whose father no one knew and who had no other relatives. The years passed. Her new parents were kind and caring. She lacked nothing, but she never truly felt at home. It was as if she remained a stranger forever. Even outwardly, she looked so different from everyone around her, with her small stature, light reddish hair, and pale freckled skin. And those strange golden eyes, which almost no one dared to look into, as if they carried a curse. She had no friends, and most of the young people her age avoided her or paid her no attention at all. Until the spring, when the day of the spring equinox arrived. Then everything changed. She had always longed to be part of a community, but when it finally happened, the only emotion that overwhelmed her was indescribable terror. All the girls and boys who had turned 17 had a special place at the celebration. This was the day of the dragon flight, when young dragons chose their riders. Melina stood quietly off to the side of the excited group of youths. She was certain no dragon would choose her, and she felt she wasn't suited to be a dragon rider anyway. She couldn't bear heights ever since her mother had fallen from those cliffs and died. She didn't even look down from the terrace of the house where she lived because something inside her would immediately start trembling, her eyes would blur, and her whole body would freeze. The thought of flying with a dragon dozens of meters above the ground was unthinkable. She knew something inside her had broken that day and was damaged forever. The spring sun bathed the meadow, and in the distance the dragons appeared. Melina took a few more steps back and leaned against the rough bark of an ancient tree. Its solidity gave her a sense of confidence and calm. She gazed memorized at the magnificent flight of the sky's rulers, frozen in admiration. The colors of the rainbow blended into their wings, turning the sky into a stunning kaleidoscope. They descended onto the meadow and landed on the surrounding rocks. Melina barely managed to stifle a scream rising on her lips when one of the dragons landed very close to her and regarded her with astonishing emerald eyes. The dragon approached her and lowered its beautiful golden head towards her face. Melina dared not breathe. The dragon slightly spread a pair of delicate wings, edged with green blending into bright orange, as if embers flickered along their edges. "I am Elementia," the words resonated in her mind. "You can climb onto my back and we'll fly." Melina swallowed, first in astonishment, and then from the terror that shook her. She couldn't fly. She squeezed her eyes shut, feeling she was faced with a fateful choice. She felt Elementia's musky breath near her face and recoiled. "No," she whispered. "No, choose someone else, someone truly worthy. I cannot." The two words echoed in her thoughts, but she rejected them, turned, and ran into the forest. She ran like a madwoman, not noticing the branches scratching her arms and face, blinded by fear and unfamiliar pain. On the meadow, everyone watched in disbelief as the scene unfolded. It had never happened before for a rider to reject the dragon that chose them. Elementia spread her wings and disappeared into the sky. So now you get to find out about what happens next week. My next story is entitled Brownies and Cream. When a minor annoyance takes a surprising turn to something more, folklore and a mother's worry work to even the score. By Arpad Nagy, published in First Line Fiction. So this story is a little bit lengthy, so bear with me here. Brownies and Cream. Even though she'd seen it with her own eyes, she would never believe what had happened. Still, she stood, blinking at the small rectangular steel grate at the back of the clothes dryer. That did not happen. I must have been more tired than I thought, because that definitely wasn't real. Dismissing it as a temporary leap into her imagination, no matter how lucid, Trish reminded herself didn't make it real. She placed the remaining clothes into the laundry basket, shut the dryer, and left the basement. Upstairs, she pulled the hamper along to the couch, sat down, and began folding and sorting the laundry with Glenn splayed out in the recliner and his favorite show, Deadliest Catch, on the TV. In other circumstances, she would have protested the show. She didn't understand how her husband continued to find it interesting. It was the same thing, episode after episode. Men went out in big boats in foul weather and were swamped by enormous waves while trying to survive the ridiculous working conditions. And there was crab. Lots of crabs, but it was the ideal, mindless TV for her mundane chore. The men on TV were still on boats and still sorting crabs when she neared the end of her task, leaving her only with sorting and pairing socks. She moaned and began rifling through the socks again. "What's wrong?" Glenn asked, out of habit more than interest. "I'm missing a sock. Again." "Caleb's, no doubt. Did you check under his bed? Last time I was in his room, he kicked half a week's clothes beneath it." Still vexed, Trish began carefully placing the folded clothes back in the hamper, ready to take them upstairs and distribute them to the children's rooms. "No, I cleared the room as much as I could stand before the smell chased me out. I know they wash. They're in the shower for ages. How can they spend so much time in there and still smell? Do they use deodorant? You might want to ask them. I I try not to think of what the boys do. They're teenagers, and teenage boys smell. Fact of life. Trish rose. After I'm done with the laundry, can we watch something together? Something other than your fishing show? She left the room and headed upstairs. In Catriana's room, which smelled of scented flowers and sugary pure perfume, Trish began placing her daughter's folded clothes into her dresser. When she pulled open the sock drawer, putting in the freshly washed and rolled socks, she saw at least a half a dozen singlets. Pushing the bundled socks aside, she searched for the missing pairs. Nothing. Katie's socks were neatly paired, with only the singles lying astray. Trish counted the lonely soldiers. 7 missing socks? How does someone lose 7 socks? She thought of the dryer grate. Returning downstairs, she pressed on Glenn's shoulder. Hun, when you have a chance, could you please check that little grate in the clothes dryer? I think it must be loose, and socks are getting sucked out. The kids are missing a bunch, and she paused, considering her following words. I think earlier when I opened the dryer, I saw one swallowed up. That seems unlikely, but sure, I'll check. Unlikely or not, we're missing socks. I don't know what else it could be. Sounds like a brune, Glenn replied in the old Gaelic tongue. House fairies, brownies. They fancy stealing things. We must have one. Her eyes narrowed as she considered her husband. He had a penchant for dropping bits of Scottish lore told to him by his mother and Crann, and she was never sure whether he did so earnestly or merely as a bit of a tease. Then she considered what she thought she had seen in the dryer. Trish decided against discussing it as a rational possibility with Glenn. He'd have a go at her for that, folklore or not. She knew what was real and what wasn't. Do these brownies do anything other than steal socks? Well, they're supposed to be quite helpful. Crann says that if you leave them a bowl of cream, they come out at night and do a bit of housework, help with the chores, that sort of thing. And how do you get rid of one, should you find yourself with a helpful thief? Get rid of one? Not sure you'd want to. Bit of cream for a hand around the house while you sleep seems a fair trade to me. It would be nice, Trish answered, gathering Glenn's mug and the bowl, emptied of ice cream. Walking to the kitchen, she remarked, Our brownie only seems interesting in stealing socks, and he doesn't like matching pairs. It had been a long day, like every day. Up early, kids fed and packed for school. Coordinating pickups and drop-offs with Glenn, work, home, supper, dishes, laundry, homework checks, screen time warnings, lights out calls, threats on device restrictions, more bedtime calls, a few words with Glenn, maybe a TV show, maybe a glass of wine, day after day, year after year. She was perpetually exhausted but happy. It was a life she'd always dreamed of having. Trolls in her drawer weren't part of that scenario, but she took the good with the bad. Glenn left to shower in bed. Trish poured herself a Chardonnay and turned on the TV. She soon fell asleep on the couch with a crime documentary for company. Glenn did not check the clothes dryer screen. Trish dreamt of the hands. Grand, Trish said, setting a cup of red rose tea in front of Glenn's grandmother. What can you tell me about brownies? What's gone missing, dear? A ring? A watch? A pair of silver earrings? No. She should have known Gran would have taken her light-hearted query seriously. The old girl may have lived in Canada for several decades, but her roots remained firmly embedded in Scottish soil. But you saw something now, didn't you? It's all right, love. You're speaking what Gran now. Your words wouldn't have gone no further than this table. Trish hesitated, but only for a moment. Gran had always had her heart. Gran, I can't say for sure. It was in the evening, and I'd had a long day. But I think I saw a tiny pair of hands steal a sock from behind the grate in the clothes dryer. Gran dodged her chin over her shoulders and leaned closer to Trish. Her eyes twinkled. Love, if you were to spill a few wee drops of that brandy on your shelf and into me cup, I'll tell you all you need to know about the brownie. All after Gran's explanation of the lore of brownies, and Gran listening to Trish explain the missing socks, Gran nodded. You got a naughty one. There'll be nothing but trouble if you don't send it off. What do you mean, trouble? The brune love to hear themselves being talked about. If you have a good one, a wee rascal that skips about tidying the home at night, making you wonder and praise the magical maid, they hear your thanks and joy and will be off from where they came. What about the sock stealer? Trish asked, refilling Gran's tea. Devils. Thieves of more than socks. That's only the beginning. But they love to hear how clever they are. What good tricksters. Compliments are like candy to the naughty ones, but it's even sweeter if you show you've seen them. As treacherous as they are, Bruna cannot tolerate being revealed. Why do they steal socks to begin with? To weave together a sack, Crann answered with a rictus grin. What do they need a sack for? To steal the children, of course. Trish's eyes bulged and her lips clamped together tightly. The suggested threat against one of her children turned her from a lamb into a bear, summoning the protective instincts for her offspring. Crann understood Trish's expression for what it was. I believe you'll be fine, dear. The children are much too grown. The brownie mostly try for the wee ones. Crann sipped her tea and knitted her brows. Still, it's best to act. The Lord helps those who help themselves. That's enough tea now, dear. We'd best make a plan. The first few nights, Trish felt foolish, emptying the laundry and talking to the walls, imagining the little goblin hidden behind the grate while lamenting the missing socks, and what a clever little elf it is that must be responsible. That silliness evaporated when she watched the video from the tiny magnetic wireless camera Caleb had set up inside the dryer door for her, telling him that she was worried about the rats were getting in and responsible for the missing items. It was on the fourth night of her cajoling that the video confirmed what she'd seen that very first evening, a tiny pair of bone-pale hands lifting the metal grate, followed by a small but wrinkled face. In the video, she watched the diminutive creature slide into the heap of warm clothes and disappear between the sweaters, shirts, and socks. It took only a few moments, and the brownie reappeared with 3 mismatched socks, which he stuffed into his pocket on its green vest, opened the grate, quickly reset the screws, then disappeared behind it. On the 5th night, Trish put Crann's plan to the test. When she went to the basement this time, the dryer was bare. She opened the door and set a bowl of cream below the grate. Then she began talking to the walls. You were a fine little bandit for a time, Brownie, and I've got the unmatched socks to prove it. But my children are grown, and your face is known. That's right, you with the small hands and face of a raisin. I've got you on video. I want you on your way now. Go back from where you came and leave this house free of your games. Reaching inside the dryer, Trish made a point of noisily removing the wireless camera and telling the brownie that his secret will remain intact. The cream was a token of peace and a farewell offering. She left the dryer door open and then placed a camera adjacent to it on the water softener tank. She had faith in Crann, but she wanted to be sure. The following morning, Trish rose as she always did before anyone else in the house. She brewed coffee and organized the kids' lunch bags and Glenn's cooler to fill them with food for the day. Then she remembered the cream. She rushed out of the basement. She found the dryer door closed when she got to the laundry room. Surprised, she cautiously opened it and peered inside. The bowl was empty. Not a spot of cream remained, though the dish looked unmoved. She turned, plucked a small camera from the tank, and returned upstairs, feeling somewhat content that the plan had worked and that her brownie was gone. Back in the kitchen, Trish set up the lunch ingredients and set bread slices on the cutting board when a chill ran up the back of her neck. Her motherly instinct told her something wasn't right. She put the knife on the counter, stood still, and listened. She heard the bedroom shower running, so Glenn was up. Tilting her head towards the boys' room, she heard the persistent bleep, bleep, bleep of their digital alarm. Typically, she would hear Katie now, shouting at the boys to turn the alarm off and claiming dibs for their bathroom. But there was nothing. The alarm continued to sound. Katie's voice remained absent. An alarm of her own sounded, and Trish walked on locked knees to the stairs. Passing their bedroom, she heard Glenn in the shower, and that first bit of normalcy took her anxiety down a notch. At the boys' room, breaking the rule of entering without notice, she slowly opened the door and sighed with relief, seeing both of them, limbs poking out from blankets, still asleep. Boys, turn your alarm off and get up. She backed out and shut the door. Taking a few steps to the left, Trish stood at Katie's door. She reached for the knob, then hesitated. She closed her eyes, and a silent prayer left her lips. Her fingers drummed lightly on the door. Catriona, Katie, sweetheart, it's time to get up. The boys are still asleep. If you're quick, you can get to the washroom first. Hurry up. She turned to walk away, but stopped. No answer came from Katie's room. An irrational fear kept her feet rooted to the floor. Crann's words suddenly came back to her. The brownie mostly try for the wee ones. In a flash, Trish turned and was through the door. She clapped a hand over her mouth. Her daughter's bed was empty, and sitting at the foot of the bed was a line of socks, the matching sets to the singlets in Katie's drawer. Trish screamed her daughter's name. The boys came bolting from their rooms. Glenn burst into the hallway. The sleepy-eyed boys rubbed their faces. Glenn asked if everyone had slept in. Trish, shaking her head, pointed to the empty bed. "Katie's gone!" Before anyone could say a word, Katie's voice filled the hall. "No, she's not, Mom. I'm right here. One of your sons got up early and used our bathroom. The smell was disgusting, so I used your shower. Sorry." Katie pushed past her brothers and called them gross, and then kissed her mom on the cheek. "Morning, Mom. And where did you find all the missing socks?" So I'm going to take a break right now, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes with the story and the two poems. So we'll listen to this little advertising, and I'll be back shortly. During this break, I wish to ask for a donation of any amount to help me keep this podcast going. I'm fine with whatever you can afford, using whatever currency you want. I've set up a donation tab on the Crann Stories and Poetry webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.crannbeatha.com using PayPal for your security. Don't worry about the exchange rates, as PayPal takes care of that for us. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know in your social circles, as the writers I showcase in this podcast deserve all the exposure they can get. I created this podcast for them because I love to read their work, and I believe it should be shared with the whole world. Now I want to explain how to find my website. Since this show is audio only, just write down the website name from the podcast image showing here and search for it. Visitors finding the website for the first time will reach the welcome page to learn a little bit about what's inside. You'll see the homepage link at the bottom of the page. Click on it if you wish to enter my world. Once on the homepage, you'll see the menu bar at the top where there are links to the pages in the website. Feel free to look around all you want. If you should happen to buy one of my books, all the better. Thank you for your support. Welcome back to the second half. So my last story is entitled "What Did the Parrot's Lover Do to Help It?" by Ignatius C.A. And he didn't put this in a publication. But it does have a link here for non-medium members who want to read this without having to pay for anything. So that's a good thing for any non-members here. Let me tell you a story which I liked very much. It's a very popular one. In the thick forest of Africa, there was a beautiful parrot. This parrot had bright, colorful feathers and a sweet voice. It could copy the sounds of the wind and the whispers of the trees. But the parrot was most special because of its deep love for another parrot. They shared everything, their happiness, their songs, and their dreams of flying freely in the sky. One day, a merchant came to the forest. He was looking for beautiful birds to take back to his palace in India. When he saw the parrot, he was amazed by its beauty. He decided to catch it. Using tricks and a trap, he captured the parrot and put it in a small, fancy cage. The parrot felt very sad as it was taken away from its forest. The cage was pretty but very small. Even though the parrot was given good food and care, he missed the freedom it had in the forest. Most of all, it missed its lover, who was still in the forest, not knowing what happened. When the merchant reached India, he placed the parrot in a big house. Many people came to see it. They admired its bright colors and loved how it would mimic human speech, but no one could see the sadness in the parrot's eyes. The parrot sang songs about its home, remembering the free sky and the love it had left behind. The next time the merchant planned to visit Africa, he asked the parrot if it wanted to send a message to his lover. The parrot asked him to tell its lover that it was kept in a beautiful, decorated cage and was fed well. The merchant promised to deliver the message. On his next trip to Africa, he went to the forest and found the parrot's lover. He shared the message about the beautiful cage and good food. When the parrot's lover heard this, it closed its eyes, flapped its wings, and fell to the ground, lying still as if it were dead. The merchant was shocked and thought the parrot's lover had died from sadness. He went back to India with a heavy heart and told the captive parrot what had happened. The parrot was deeply hurt by the news. But then it quickly closed its eyes, flapped its wings, and fell dead to the bottom of the cage. The merchant, seeing the parrot lying lifeless, was upset. Thinking the parrot had died, he opened the cage to take it out. As soon as it was outside the cage, the parrot jumped up, spread its wings, and flew away from the merchant. Surprised, the merchant asked the parrot, "What is this?" The parrot replied, "My lover in the African forest was sending me a message when it pretended to be dead. It showed me that if you want to be free, you must die while you are alive. You must die from the cage of unnecessary wants and let go of your evil desires." And it's this parting message here. So now we're going to read my first poem, and this one is dark. I want to say it is kind of an allusion to what's the genocide in Gaza. So let me read this to you, and you tell me what you think. I, who time abandoned, it's all too familiar to see, by Cead Fáilte. Enter. I bed in one corner, watch the walls, empty, so alone, somewhere in a pocket of darkness, a stranger in a stranger land. Shiver, it is hot, then cold. There are the stacks, books, dead on battlegrounds of indifference. Dust crawls, ants trudge, a tired infestation pulls tighter and tighter. Too spent to let go, veins flow, as a naked light bulb blinds you, and exultant it watches you cringe. Hide from pain, truth, and all that forces feelings so savagely upon you. No ambuscades here, all too familiar, you see, whereof a fan moves to a somnambulous dance of loose papers. All too familiar, you see, timepiece of my life. Broken or lost, who knows? Time, a commodity as worthless as gold. Throw them away and watch them bleed. The doors, the anguish of doors. Whisper carnage and death, then scream and scream, but you can't change it, never can. Always the doors, pushing and pushing, waiting for a savior to free them from their wall embrace. And inside my killing fields of tormented howls, burn of the bulb and the whir of the fan fall like whiplashes. Rot of dead books is viscera of covenants, absurd and divine. I lie in a straitjacketed bed, lie and wait for it to end, shiver, starve, and burn, like the children of execution wastelands, far away. My last poem is an autumn story. It's short, and now this one was written by Catherine Elaine in Substack, and entitled Seasons. Autumn smiles ever so warmly, but I know his cold heart. His kindness comes with a high price. He harvests the riches spring and summer have known with their tears and sweat. He steals the light of day minute by minute. A cold thief hiding behind short, warm days, beautiful colors, pumpkin pies, and warm drinks. The bright colors are elusive. The joys given by autumn are short. One day we marvel over the colorful leaves, only to walk over their wet, rotting corpses the next morning. Autumn laughs at us. All shall pass, you fools, all shall pass. All beauty dies, exposed to the cruel passing of time. Winter comes with brutal honesty, exposing the lies of autumn. All the colors, all that beauty was a lie, a fleeting moment between the heat of summer and the winter frost, a cozy denial, an attempt to cope with the cold, harsh nights. Winter comes with cold honesty, spring with hope and the promise of new life, summer with hard work, heat, and passion, but autumn comes with beautiful lies. So that's all I have for everyone this week. I appreciate you joining me once again, and I'll be back again next week with another bunch of stories and poems. Sláinte. Guramahagat. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed the variety of stories and poems again this week. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, and reply, as this goes a long way towards reaching more listeners around the world. As a Shanké, I hope you will allow me to continue delighting you with a story or poem here under the crown of beatha. Maybe they will bring you a smile, take you away from your troubles for a time. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. May your path rise up to meet you, and the sun warm your bonnet as you walk down the lane to the pub. May your friends and relations bring you a pint after you retell these stories and poems I give you here. Slán go fóill. Goodbye for now.